Shadow of Rome, one of the many forgotten titles for the PS2 that didn't manage to sell that well, despite the game's unique game mechanics and bloodshed brutality out of it. It's one of Capcom's brutal games ever made, where breaking or even cutting off the enemy's body parts is a thing, even to the point of throwing their limbs at a crowd would excite them, to the point of rewarding you with better stuffs, all the while having a mixture of a stealth element in between sections outside of the arena matches, roaming around the city of Rome, customizing a room for collectibles, and sneaking through restricted areas in the story. As for me, I did manage to play this game before, winning every arena matches including the chariot racing, defeating every bosses in the game, and accomplishing stealth missions in between, although the game can be a bit confusing for some parts of the stealth sections. This is K1PM. This time I'll be doing a full review of Shadow of Rome. I'll be going more in depth about the game and pointing out the pros and the cons of it.
You will all bow to me.
Silence! No barbarian has the power to crush mighty Rome! Ah!
Shadow of Rome was developed and published by Capcom at around February to March in 2005 on the PS2. The big leagues in the gaming industry that develop a lot of different games in the past that most of you already might know. This game on the other hand is really brutal. Limbs can be cut off and be used as a weapon, heads can be thrown outside of the arena for a better score, or how special moves can be executed in ways like these. It surely was a unique experience that's not like the others out there, that focuses a lot on the unconventional gladiatorial matches and a bit of chariot racing at the side, while having stealth sections in between that focuses on the story itself. The overall plot and story of the game is set on the Roman Empire during the death of Julius Caesar in 44 BC, with Agrippa and Octavianus being the main leading characters, while following a series of events that happen in history. This includes the Gallic Wars and Julius Caesar's death, to the appointing of Octavian and the Battle of Actium, with the developers' creative interpretation of it, of course, adding a few creative ideas of their own that changes the timeline and direction that spices up the story, containing a lot more gladiatorial story battles and more of a searching for the true killer, even though it's kinda been obvious already at the start. Now, before I go more into that, I'll be talking a bit more of the story. If you wanna skip at this part, you could go ahead to this timestamp below. It's quite a bit long, even though I managed to shorten it out somehow. While Agrippa was fighting against the Goths or barbarians as he says, Octavianus was surprised to see Agrippa's father, Vipsanius, was accused as the murderer of Julius Caesar, despite their close relation to one another, then announces Antonius as the successor. Octavianus later on questions Cicero about the death of Caesar, but ends up getting a straightforward answer out of it. With the help of Pansa's guidance as the most trusted agent of Caesar, Octavianus managed to sneak through the Senate guards, hearing Maecenas' proposal about a gladiatorial games throughout different provinces, and the winner would be the executioner of Agrippa's father, Vipsanius. After that, he tried to reach for Agrippa after his return from the war, and talk about the big news of Caesar's death and his father branded as the murderer of Caesar, as well as her mother is also getting executed at the Foro Romano right now. He tries to stop the execution through beating up the guards, but Theseus himself have executed her much early. Despite Agrippa being a centurion, he couldn't do much to stop it, especially considering how strong Theseus can be. He was later on saved by Claudia after their battle, along with Octavianus himself. After a series of events trying to rescue his father from prison but ultimately fading in the end, they managed to learn the last words of Caesar, et tu Brute, that would serve as a clue in searching for the true killer. Agrippa took the offer in becoming a gladiator, working alongside with Claudia and Sextus in order to reach his father during the execution day, while Octavianus' side of the story tries to search for proof on who actually killed Julius Caesar himself, spying a few important people that had connections to the assassinations. This includes from Cicero and Maecenas to Marcus Brutus' whereabouts, although some of them eventually died, getting assassinated by a group of conspirators, which it turns out to be Decius himself in the end. Even Octavianus almost got himself killed, since he was hunted down by Sextus near the end, after he was ordered by the Mistress, which I'm assuming it's coming from Cleopatra VII herself. We'll never know, since they kinda cancelled the sequel to this game. Oh well. Octavianus was soon caught by Maecenas along with his plans, and surprisingly, his plans was actually appointing Octavianus as the true successor of Rome. Then after a lot of arena matches for Agrippa on the different provinces of Rome, fighting against several boss members of the Val Cross table handled by Decius, Agrippa managed to meet his father again and gets the opportunity to fight against Decius himself at the Great Arena. After a few beatdowns, Maecenas managed to caught the real murderers of Caesar and announces Octavianus as the true successor. Antonius ends up running away and tries to fight Agrippa after Decius lost. Yeah, I know, I don't even understand either. Why would Antonius didn't run away immediately? Especially when people of Rome already know that he's the traitor. He even exposes himself of danger that much that it doesn't make any sense. To the point Sextus had to launch an immediate attack just to save him from being caught. As Antonius makes a run for it during the chaos, Agrippa tries to follow Antonius but ends up getting saved by his father from being shot by an arrow behind. Later on, Agrippa manages to stop Sextus' rampage along with a few sibling flashback relation with Claudia. Sextus eventually dies, then Agrippa joins Octavianus in fighting against Antonius' fleet, similar to the Battle of Actium of 31 BC. Agrippa manages to fight through different ships and countless soldiers along the way, until reaching to Antonius and defeating him in the end, thus ending the whole battle. In the end, Agrippa, Octavianus, and even Claudia are at the top of the garden, mourning the death of Claudia's brother, Sextus. Agrippa asks Claudia if she'll ever see her again, but says nothing in the end. And that's the whole story of it. Overall though, it's not that bad. At the same time, it's okay. Despite how the plot of the story follows some of the events in history, along with the developer's own twists and events, the stretching and badly execution on some of these scenes kinda wears it down. The game already have a good start that introduces a player to a brutal gladiatorial arena while participating in matches against the barbarians like on the Gallic Wars. But with Octavianus' side of the story just seemed to be poorly done. As every arena consists of 5 or more matches on Agrippa's side, every time around 3 matches or so, it ends up going to Octavianus' stealth sections. And after a few minutes of doing a few rooms on Octavianus' side, it ends up suddenly going to Agrippa's side of the story. The whole changing feels too short and too fast in between. That ends up feeling there's a huge gap in the story. And I'm not the only one having the same sentiments as this one. Why not just let me finish a single chapter or the whole arena matches first, then go to the other section next? I understand that they wanted to give the player more room to breathe and explore more on the story itself. With the right timing, it's actually quite alright, but on this case, it feels like the arena matches are too short instead. Switching too fast in between that makes the story seem confusing, even though the story itself should have been okay. Although some of the scenes just doesn't make any sense for me. Like how Antonius decides to face Agrippa on the arena, even though he's already caught as the traitor. Even worse, he should have just targeted Maecenas or Octavianus, as they were the ones who exposes him as the traitor, as well as plotting against him. It's quite a shame considering some of the characters were actually well made, like the short rivalry between Agrippa and Barca's case, or how charming Sextus' expression can be, along with her dexterous sister, Claudia. Although, as I said a while ago, some parts of the story just doesn't add up a bit on the player's point of view, like how Maecenas is actually trying to help Octavianus secretly, even though Octavianus kinda actually almost died a lot of times already. Despite knowing Octavianus is the true successor of Caesar, just doesn't make any sense to me. The only way to know about this is if you know a bit of Roman history. But then again, considering the game already has a twist of their own, rewriting some parts of the story, it still feels confusing. There's a continuation for this series, but unfortunately, as I said a while ago, it's already been cancelled after the game's poor sales. We could have seen a next series that involves the war with Cleopatra. That would have been interesting. Who knows what could have Capcom done, along with Keiji Inafune's direction. Now when it comes to the gameplay of Agrippa's side, it's actually really great, having to enjoy that bloodlust feel to it, of eliminating my opponents while trying to please the crowd at the same time. Having to maintain a score called salvos with the use of a bunch of weapons to execute my opponent in different ways. Either by thrusting a spear onto their chests and start ripping them off upwards, or just slamming them on a bed of spikes in the arena. Could even get creative on properly timed counters or simply stealing an opponent's weapon. In rare cases, using a rose then throwing it to the people gives out a huge amount of salvos. The more salvos that you could get, the more weapons that the crowd would give out. From swords, maces, and ridiculously large weapons, to bow and arrow, daggers, roses, and even foods like cheese, bread, or meat. And when gaining a lot of salvos after several arena matches, the game rewards the player with 2 different sets of armors to be equipped. It's a nice addition they added to the game, while having a lot of different layouts and rules on every arena stages. That still spices up the gameplay in a way, either competing in a battle royale, team battle, siege, or other specific matches. It doesn't bore me that much over time. I know that doesn't sound realistic in a way, but it's actually enjoyable to compete in these kind of unique matches. And once a player finishes the game, every arena matches can be revisited over here, including the chariot racing ones. Although the weapons themselves can be a bit simple, having little amounts of combos available to use that ends up being a bit too repetitive, doing the same kind of movement against the enemy again and again, even with the durability of the weapon that forces a player to switch to a different one instead. The combos still feels lacking a bit, especially with the special weapons like bows, slings, or even torches. But using those weapons can still be really satisfying. Despite how ridiculously huge some of the weapons can be, I can feel the weight of it just crushing my enemy down with it, especially with weapons like Magnus. I can easily slice them nicely like butter, while having special food items that can easily restore my health nicely. Although it is kinda annoying that once I started eating my food, I can't exactly stop until I'm full or getting hit by the enemy. I kinda missed that one out. There's also the chariot racing that I really enjoyed. The intense racing matches while battling to the death with my opponents is just so satisfying to see. Although I wish the developers could have worked this out more. It feels a bit lacking in some areas, like the amount of weapons available to use and the type of enemies that I could encounter there. The boss fights on the other hand is actually challenging to beat. From fighting against Barca's absurd strength, or Arcana's agile archery along with their vulture friends, to fighting against huge elephant bosses, different stronger African warriors, or even bosses with unique sets of moves to deal with. It might sound absurd and impossible to beat for some bosses, but with the game's clever design for each of the battles, it's really enjoyable to beat them at their own game. Even when battling different animals such as vultures, tigers, or even elephants, I still find them exciting to fight against. Except for the final boss fight, however. It kind of feels lacking and a bit anticlimactic. I'd be more happier to fight against Theseus or even Sextus at this point again, rather than having to face Antonius in the end. I'm not even sure why or how he's that strong compared to Theseus or even Sextus when it comes to the story. Now when it comes to the stealth sections of the game, however, it's a bit of a mixed feeling for me. Aside from the problem of the constant early switching of the gladiator matches and the stealth sections, it's actually nice how they implemented it. That eases out the tension after a few arena matches, focusing on the story itself. That builds up the character in the game well. But then again, it's just an okay stealth game. Not only where the controls feels clunky when moving around, but how basic some of the stealth sections feels like. For most parts of the game, you just do specific objectives around the city of Rome, and then sneak around restricted areas that guards can kill you instantly or civilians would alert the guards. The only way to move around it is with the use of the items around the area, and disguises to wear in order to sneak past through guards. Items like vases, honeypots, or even ropes can easily knock out the enemy without a problem. Including the banana peel that feels like a joke item is actually really useful. While items like rats and frogs can easily throw off civilian maids that ends up running for their lives. While stone and apples can be used to distract enemy guards or let other people take the blame for it. It's a bit creative how playful it can be used with these kinds of ways. I even like how disguises can be really useful up to a certain degree. Can be used to easily pass through guards, and in some special cases, the guards would end up questioning the player. Depending on the answer that a player gives out, it either eases out the tension or lets them be more suspicious of you. It's a clever way what they added here that's not the same as with the other stealth games that I've played before during its time. Although when it comes to the enemy's AI, however, on the stealth section, it's very simple to the point it can be a bit disappointing. I can easily lure any guards away from their patrol area with the use of a whistle or slight noise, making the game a bit too easy to accomplish. And in some cases where the guards doesn't leave their posts, I can just easily smash their heads without a problem. Even after getting caught by the enemy, they'll just easily forget the whole thing, without even calling a backup or being more cautious of where the player might be. Even for a PS2 game, they could have at least make it more sensible in that case. When it comes to the game's overall art style and graphics, however, it's actually amazing. I expect no less from Capcom themselves how well made the designs for each character and stages throughout the game. The game manages to encapsulate the feel of Rome of its time, detailing every inch of it into a well-made design for each stage. Although some of the weapons and arena stages in the game feels a bit off, leaning a bit on the unrealistic kind of design, which is still good by the way. It has its own unique charm. While the armors themselves on the other hand weren't that much. They usually show only a few Roman and gladiator armors, such as Lorica Musculata or the Lequarius. It's a bit of a missed opportunity, but still the armors in the game is still alright. It might not be the most accurate, but it's still decent overall. The soundtrack of the game is pretty much alright. They managed to at least have a decent theme for most parts of the game that creates a certain tension to it that makes stages in the game feels exciting, like the music during the Battle of Actium near the end of the game. But it doesn't exactly have a sense of unique charm for some parts of the music, except for a few notable soundtracks that I really enjoy listening to it, such as the background music when preparing for an arena match. I really love this short piece of music that feels like a truly gladiatorial match. That's why I give this game a rating of 7.8 out of 10. Shadow of Rome was truly a unique game of its time, not only in terms of its brutal or Roman gladiator theme, but its unique gameplay mechanics what makes the game stand strong as its own. With a set of unconventional arena matches, it makes players wanted more from its action, fighting off hordes of multiple gladiator opponents to wild beasts and different matches along the way, while challenging several different bosses in the game with some intense chariot racing at the side. Although the game fell short on its story and stealth sections with Octavianus' part, despite having a few unique sides of it, it feels a bit too basic in some areas. The developers could have worked this out even better, along with the proper timing when going to Octavianus' side. It's kinda unfortunate how they end up flopping in the end. If you're still curious about the game, you could watch my full playthrough of the game over here. I managed to compile what the game has to offer, with its proper aspect ratio of it, of course. For more videos such as these, why not head down to my channel to check things out? I do accurate game reviews of the past games, and some other new ones too. If you consider subscribing to my channel, please do follow me on my Twitter account for more updates, in case something bad might happen all of a sudden. There's still a way to contact me over there. This is K1PM, and I bid you farewell.